Before we talk about price or aging or production, we need to talk about something far more uncomfortable. You. Because if you've ever picked up an expensive bottle and felt a sense of relief, not excitement, but relief, that means the price already did its job. It reassured you. It told you that you made a smart choice, that you didn't mess up, that you're not the kind of person who doesn't get it. Most people think expensive bottles cost more because they're better. The truth is harder to sit with. Many bottles cost more because they protect you from doubt. And once that protection is in place, taste becomes negotiable. This is behind the barrel. The moment you see a bottle that costs 10 times more than another, your brain doesn't calmly ask why. It assumes there must be a reason, something you're supposed to respect, something you'd feel foolish ignoring. That assumption forms instantly, before logic, before curiosity, before taste. And once it's there, everything else bends around it. The liquid hasn't changed yet, but your expectations already have. When you see a bottle that costs 10 times more than another, your brain doesn't calmly analyze production costs. It panics a little. It assumes there must be a reason, something special, something you don't want to miss. Because if there is a reason and you ignore it, that means you're the kind of person who doesn't get it, and nobody wants to be that person. Here's the first uncomfortable truth. Price doesn't explain quality. Price creates expectation, and expectation rewrites experience. That means the bottle doesn't need to be 10 times better. It only needs you to believe it might be. Most people think expensive bottles are expensive because they're hard to make. In reality, many of them are expensive because they're hard to question. Once the price is high enough, doubt becomes embarrassing. You don't want to admit you don't taste what others claim to taste, so you nod, you agree, you learn the vocabulary, you participate. And this is where it gets awkward. A lot of people aren't tasting anything special. They're tasting belonging. Belonging to a group that knows. Belonging to a narrative that says this bottle is serious, refined, elevated. The liquid becomes secondary. Let's talk about production, because this is where people usually push back. Yes, some bottles cost more to make. Aging costs money, storage costs money, loss over time costs money. But here's the part nobody likes to say out loud. Those costs do not scale anywhere near the final price. A bottle that costs 10 times more rarely costs 10 times more to produce, not even close. The gap between cost and price is filled with something far more powerful than ingredients. It's filled with story. Story about heritage, story about founders, story about patience, craft, discipline, tradition. Your brain doesn't audit these stories, it absorbs them. And once absorbed, they feel real. Packaging is where the manipulation becomes physical. Heavy glass, thick bases, wax seals. These are not neutral choices. Weight makes your brain think important. Complexity makes your brain think care. When your hands feel quality, your mouth follows orders. Then there's the label. Fonts alone can justify price in the human mind. Traditional fonts say authority. Minimal fonts say confidence. Script fonts say human effort. None of this guarantees a better product, but it guarantees a stronger emotional response. And emotion is what people actually pay for. Now comes the word salad. Reserve, select, limited, small batch. Words that feel regulated, serious, official. Many of them mean nothing legally, but they mean everything psychologically. They tell your brain how to behave. They tell you how seriously to take the bottle. Let's be honest for a second, and this is where people start squirming. If you spend a lot of money on a bottle and it's disappointing, you don't immediately say that out loud. You look for reasons, you look for nuance, you look for excuses. Not because you're dishonest, but because your brain hates admitting it was fooled. So harshness becomes bite. Burn becomes warmth. Simplicity becomes clean. You didn't suddenly become poetic, you became defensive.
This is why blind tastings cause chaos. Remove the price and suddenly people lose confidence. Some get quiet. Some get angry. Some insist the test is flawed. Because blind tasting doesn't just test the liquid, it tests the story you've been telling yourself. And here's the part nobody likes to admit. Experts get fooled too. Not because they're incompetent, but because they're human. Expertise doesn't remove bias, it just gives bias better vocabulary. Scarcity is another trick. Limited releases, numbered bottles, artificial shortages. Sometimes they're real, sometimes they're not. It doesn't matter. The idea of missing out activates the same fear centers as loss, and fear is a fantastic motivator.
Expensive bottles aren't just for drinking, they're for being seen. They sit on shelves, they get photographed, they get mentioned casually. Oh, this one? Yeah, I picked it up a while back. The value is social as much as sensory. This is why price drops scare premium brands. Lower the price, and suddenly the same liquid feels worse. Nothing changed chemically, perception did, because price isn't a reflection, it's a frame. Here's another uncomfortable thought. If you already believe a bottle is great, your brain will work overtime to make sure your senses agree. That's not stupidity, that's survival psychology. Consistency feels safer than doubt.
This is also why arguing about bottles gets weirdly emotional. You're not arguing about flavor, you're arguing about identity, about taste, about whether your past decisions were justified. That's why people get defensive so fast. Marketing doesn't need to lie, it just needs to suggest. Humans are incredibly good at filling in gaps. Show them a high price, a heavy bottle, a serious story, and they'll do the rest themselves. So what are you really paying for when you pay 10 times more? You're paying for permission. Permission to feel refined. Permission to feel knowledgeable. Permission to feel like you made the right choice. And that doesn't mean the bottle is bad. Some expensive bottles are genuinely excellent. But excellence alone almost never explains the price. The rest is psychology, and psychology is powerful.
The uncomfortable part is realizing how much of your experience was decided before you tasted anything. The label spoke first, the price spoke louder, your senses came last. Once you see this, you can't unsee it. You start noticing how often people describe bottles using stories instead of sensations, how often they repeat phrases they've heard before, how rarely they describe what they actually feel. And yes, this applies to you too, to me, to everyone. Nobody is immune. Thinking you are is just another version of the same bias. Understanding this doesn't ruin enjoyment, it changes it. You stop chasing price as proof. You stop assuming expensive means meaningful. You start paying attention again. Some people don't want that awareness. They prefer the illusion. And honestly, that's fine. Illusions can be comfortable. Truth usually isn't. But if this video made you slightly uncomfortable, good. That discomfort is the sound of a belief being questioned. The real reason some bottles cost 10 times more isn't hidden in the liquid, it's built around it, carefully, deliberately, and very successfully. The bottle didn't become 10 times better, your expectations did. And once you realize that, you'll never look at a shelf or your own past purchases the same way again.